Hey everybody, Jason here. Just letting you know that there were a couple times we had a pause during the filming and taping of the episode. We had to just take a few breaks to take some personal calls that were unplanned. Just a heads up, there will be a couple abrupt cuts. You'll probably hear my voice again. So thanks. Appreciate you understanding. Very good. Hi Fran, how are you?
Good. How about yourself? Turning on the noise removal now, so that way it sounds really nice. Okay, sorry. Now we can start.
Very good. I'm doing well. Welcome to Use Your Items, a podcast about video games and at least one person who makes them.
At least one person who makes them. I mean, we all have made video games in our lives, right? Have you, as a kid, not at the playground, made your own rules and made a game?
Oh, I've made games, but
Then you are a
video
game maker.
entertainment device? I think not.
Okay, fair. Not a.
I don't think I could code my way out of a paper bag if I had you watching over my shoulder and telling me exactly what to do.
No, click that button. No, the other one. No, left click. No, you right clicked. Left
Well,
click,
you'd
please.
be like, okay, use the bracket. No, the square one. No, not that. Stop. It has to be, Jason, the square one. And I tell you, I don't know what layer that's on my keyboard because I don't use it, so I got rid of that key.
Oh my goodness, same deal here. This is a whole different tangent, but my girlfriend, she cannot use my keyboard because of layers and stuff. I also have a keyboard with layers, but that's a whole nother conversation. This isn't use your keys. This is use your items. So
I am very okay with a tangent episode Patreon special about keyboards. I love mechanical keyboards. It's honestly one of the, I got into the hobby like in 2019, right before the pandemic.
Oh my goodness.
And it was a deep rabbit hole. I'm actually very unhappy with the keyboard I have now and the layers, and I'm thinking about switching back, but I'm
switching back to another keyboard, another key switch,
to a previous build that I had, to a smaller percentage keyboard. Actually,
Gotcha.
I'm at like a 65%, I believe, right now, and I think I want to go. I was at like a 50.
Gotcha.
And I liked having a split ergo like you have.
Yeah.
And right now I'm on an Alice split, which I thought I would like more, and it's okay, but I have issues. Again, that's another episode of another podcast maybe. But anyway, yeah. So welcome back. Thanks for doing this with me again. Today we're talking about the one, the only Banjo-Kazooie.
Banjo-Kazooie. So this is a little bit different from last episode. I think you have played Banjo-Kazooie previously to completion. And no, my bad. Opposite. I had finished Final Fantasy VII to completion. You had not. And now for Banjo-Kazooie, you have finished to completion and I have not.
Yes, that is true. Although there is a bit of a hang up there with this game for this episode. Namely that I did not finish this game entirely, which I think is maybe definitely part of the conversation for this episode. And yeah, I did beat this game previously. I played it as a child. I have some pretty distinct memories about this game, actually. Mm-hmm. Probably the most salient one is I remember sharing a VHS tape with my cousin in the Bronx. We lived in the Bronx, and we had this VHS tape that I guess he got or I got with Nintendo Power. Good old Nintendo Power.
Rip. You got a VHS tape with Nintendo Power?
I'm pretty sure it was like mail order or something like that. So it was a demo sizzle reel. It was like a series of demo sizzle reels.
I had never heard. I've heard of CDs inside of a magazine because CDs are so flat you can fit it in there. But I had never heard of this VHS program.
Well, this was 98, right? So the game came out in 98. So this had to be 98, 90, 97, 98. There was a VHS tape with a bunch of sizzle reels of different game demos. So it wasn't the demo itself. It was actually just the sizzle reel that would show up on TV, I guess, but we were like obsessed with the Banjo-Kazooie sizzle reel. We were obsessed with this demo that we didn't get to play. There were no demos on. I don't think there were any demos on N64, actually, now that I think about it.
None that would be easy to get. Like, it would probably be like very select few reviewers slash certain people, they send them this cartridge that it says not for resale. And that would be the only way I would imagine that they would have done demos on the N64.
Yeah, like I remember getting demo discs on PS1. Very, very, it's like burned into my memory having a demo disc with 4 games on it, and it had like, I don't know, like 15 minutes or one level or something of each game.
Some of those demos, goodness, I'm getting into another tangent, but some of those demos got a sizable chunk of replayability for the amount that the demo actually included. I had so back growing up, I sometimes did not have as much cash, for $60 for a whole new game.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'd be like, oh, I can have this magazine and I get 5 games and this is great. This is amazing. It's it's amazing. And some of those until recently when I streamed it, the original Spider-Man for PlayStation 1, I had replayed the first level, the Scorpion level, so many times on a demo disc. So many times. I never finished the game, never played the real game.
I think I even know the game.
It's the one where they don't have a lot of draw distance, so the excuse they have is that Green Goblin has put fog in.
Yes.
And so that way, that's why you couldn't reach the ground level.
Yeah, I have to say, I won't even call this a tangent. This is clearly part of the conversation, as we're I guess boomers of the video game generation. Now, not truly. We weren't there for Pong and the rest of that in the 80s. We are children of the 90s. However, there is something to be said for games that needed to use and abuse storytelling elements to work around and work in very clear hardware and software limitations that I feel like doesn't really happen anymore.
Yeah, now that you can essentially, the world is your oyster, you can excuse away nothing, right? You can show everything. I think that's one of the reasons why horror games sometimes do worse nowadays, because nowadays you can show everything. You just CGI that, make everything cool or whatever. While back in the day with Jaws, this is more movies, but that relates to video games too, with Jaws and Alien and all these things. Oh, it's too expensive to do this animatronic, so we're gonna have to put it in the shadows and make it very shadowy. And to bring it back to video games, Resident Evil was one of those games where the draw distance was like 10 feet, but we're like, you know what? Just fog. It's a foggy area. Don't worry about it. Makes it scarier.
Resident Evil is such a cool history of video gaming and development and design, because it was part of that piece of PS1 history with fixed camera angles, which I think, and I don't know anything from anything, but my guess is that it was to solve the problem of cameras are really, really hard to program in the 90s.
I would imagine that 2000s. Some of it. I honestly also think, so a technical challenge obviously was one of them, but I would also assume or guess that it was also a design decision to be able, we are entering this realm where these people wanted to tell a very cinematic story. They wanted to show off a game where it felt like you were playing a movie. And this is happening right now in VR, that it's very difficult to do because in VR you have so much control over the camera and everything. So in video games, they were like, let's just bring over cinematography skills over to video games. Okay, we're going to set up the camera here. If it's a scary big monster, we want the camera to be low. If we want the you to feel lonely, we'll bring the camera way out so that it's very wide and you're alone in this.
Right.
So I think it probably was that process of these artists wanting to use this new medium and having to learn, like using what worked from the old ones to the new ones. It's kind of like how movies went through that, right? Like when movies came out, all the movie techniques were essentially theater techniques. It was usually from one angle, one room, we're talking, and this is just the next step of that.
Yeah, I think there's a really, really cool overlap between the development of these visual artistic trends that you kind of see at the birth and genesis and burgeoning of each medium, theater, from storytelling, and moving pictures and film from theater, and then video games from movies. And we talked about it a little bit when we spoke about, I think, anime and different forms of media that would impact and have probably influenced Final Fantasy VII. And it's interesting to think that the things that were probably really influencing them were either things that were super, super new and very, very exciting, or they were pieces of media that were so ingrained in their medium from the 70s, American New Wave, or from the 80s and 90s with like that twist in the birth of blockbusters and Star Wars and stuff that really changed how video games would look at something like that and then bring it into their space. And
yeah, definitely.
Super cool. I think to bring it back to Banjo-Kazooie is super important because it's one of the first and maybe one of the best platformers on the N64. For better or for worse, for our takes on it as 2023 people, it holds a very warm spot in a lot of people's hearts. And so the reason why it's on this series, on my blog series, which I have yet to write the article, but the reason it's on this series is because a couple of my friends, Mike and Brian, shout outs to you guys, have suggested it, and they brought it up because it's a game that was a single player game. It was the only one they had, which is, this is a common thread in a lot of these games, especially from the 90s, where you had one game and you had it for 8 months, maybe 5 months, something like that. Like, you had it for such a long time. You didn't get new games all the time. They didn't come out all the time. There used to be a real dry spell of literally nothing, not like nothing you wanted to play. There were no new games. That was it. Especially most households were one console households, which is still true today. But there's so much multi-platform release, and that I think that impacts it. And so having only one game, something that I know Mike sunk a ton of his time into, and honestly, the thing that they both came back to is the music. How iconic, how important, how influential the music was. How these songs, Gruntilda's Lair and all these things, just sort of like earworm their way into your memory, and you still hum them. I mean, Mike still hums them to this day, he said. So
I would extend
thank you
that.
for the suggestion, Mike. But it's gotta. I think the music's really got to be one of the biggest. And like the whole sound design of the game has to be.
That's
what
I was about to say.
draws.
I would just extend that to just sound. Just anything that hits your ear holes out of this game is just very iconic and very. You could probably put it in a game today, and it will not feel out of place. It's that type of timeless type of music where it's like. There's so much emotion and evocativeness in each of those songs that they get played and you immediately know, I know what this is about. I know what I can already see the level in my mind, or I could even, and if not the level, then at the very least the flow of play, like just the opening theme is just so fast, so quirky. It just makes you want to get up and just get out there and go on an adventure. Definitely. I 100% agree that if you had to pick one thing that's really good about this game, it is the music and the sound design and just, everything about it.
It's incredible. It's so iconic, and the really cool thing I always found about the sound and the characters and the music in that game was that it feels like coming from a game like Super Mario 64. Like, we can't help but talk about that game while we talk about this game. They're so directly related. Rare saw Super Mario 64 and they were directly, Greg Mayles was directly influenced by not just the success, but the audacity or the achievement of Super Mario 64 and what could be done. And there's some really cool game dev history in there too. But that was a game that's also super iconic music, still to this day, I still hear like Super Slider in my head, and it's just like a little, it's like my brain worm that I can't, it just like, it plays when dumb stuff's happening. And it's the same way here, like the way the characters talk, like that like Charlie Brown teacher,
God, I
like
love
chatter
it.
is so good. I'll cut some in, and I think that's got to be it. So for me, this game is just a classic platformer from my childhood. I remember that demo tape super well, playing the absolute crap out of this game. And yeah, the music is something that really, the music, the characters, there's a lot to love here. There's a lot that I don't love anymore.
Oh Lord! Oh, before we get into that,
Yeah.
Because I was gonna say, like, also just comparing it for Mario, like you mentioned that game has good music and everything, and I do agree. Mario 64 has really good music, but I do feel like the Mario music is very video gamey. It is very, I don't know why. I don't know. I could not tell you. I'm not a musically talented, so I would not be able to tell you why. If it's the melody, if it's the
Right
time
now, I gotta get a
signature.
composer on the show.
We got one. We were talking with them.
Oh, that's true.
So, oh, you mean like get them on the show and talking?
Yes.
Oh, that'd be
Yeah.
great. That'd be so good. But at least
I can see that in the future.
at least for Mario, it really does feel like an N64 music. It feels like it is music from that time, and like it's really good, and it's really good video game music, but it's, I don't know why Banjo-Kazooie's music just goes beyond that. It goes like, I could see this being in a goofy cartoon about a bear and a bird, right? Like I could see that being a Sad AM cartoon right next to Ed and Eddie and Dexter's Laboratory and like all these characters, right? It feels like it transcended video gameness, and I'm not saying that as a marker of you're not real art unless you transcend video games, but I'm saying that more of as a just such a good piece of medium that just can pierce into all these different people without even needing to be video games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good place for us to segue into a little game dev history.
Let's do it.
So, as we know, the game was developed by Rare. Rare, most famous for, of course, Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo. And Rare created their, I believe it was called the Rare Advanced Computer Modeling Technology, so the Rare ACM is what they used to make Donkey Kong Country. And what was really cool about that piece of tech was it allowed them to layer multiple textures on top of each other to create depth in a 2D space. So that's why I think Donkey Kong Country is one of the best looking games from that era. It's just an incredible achievement.
Oh yeah, definitely. So many games, like indie games today that are trying to like look retro, are trying to emulate that art style, and they were able to do it like out of the box and everything. I don't know if this is something that you're gonna mention, but the Shigeru Miyamoto actually did not initially enjoy the art style / just Donkey Kong Country in general.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Shigeru Miyamoto was essentially, once Donkey Kong was done, the original arcade game of Donkey Kong and all these games came out, he essentially kind of didn't want to deal with it anymore, because he was like, there's really nothing else. Like, we already have a platformer character, and that's Mario. We already have a Metroid character, and that's Metroid, and like all these different things. And for some reason, just did not care too much about Donkey Kong Country. And I think that was the reason why Rare was approached to develop it. Because they were like, Nintendo was like, well, we don't know what to do with this.
Right, we have this character in the stable. We gotta use him. Here, yo, Rare, you can figure it out. So maybe we'll cross Donkey Kong Country. I don't know if it's on the list. I have to double check. But anyway, that's Rare. That's Donkey Kong Country. Then they started working in 95, I think it was, or 90. It must have been like 95. They started working on a game called Dream, and this is, if anybody's in the know about Banjo-Kazooie, you'll know this tidbit. If not, this is for you. They were originally working on a game called Dream, And Dream was about a boy who lands on an island full of pirates, and the boy's a pirate, and they get into a bunch of hijinks and wackiness. And Rare really wanted to make an RPG. They wanted to make a role-playing game. I can't say that they were inspired by, original Final Fantasy or anything like that. Maybe Super Mario RPG. I'm assuming that's in the gestalt for them. However, they wanted this RPG. You can find footage of it. It's kind of like an isometric top-down kind of RPG, a little bit more like, I think it was directly influenced by like LucasArts, like CRPGs, like computer RPGs and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So they wanted to do that, and then they developed it for 16 months, and they're like, this feels not great. Like they were afraid that there just wasn't enough there. Like it was fine, but the characters seemed a little thin. So they changed the character from a boy to a rabbit, and they're like, this is kind of stupid. And then they changed the rabbit into a bear with a backpack, and then that was it. Banjo-Kazooie was born. Like Banjo was born on the spot. Like just so, and I bury the lead a little bit. Part of that change too came with the N64, which comes out in 96. So they're working on Dream in 95. The N64 comes out, more or less, and they're like, okay, so we don't need this cool technology that we spent forever developing, and we took to critical acclaim with Donkey Kong Country, but now we have this new opportunity, and we're kind of like just shocked by Super Mario 64. So they change the model, they change the idea, they get this bear with a backpack, and they decide that they're going to make a 3D space. They're going to make a 3D world with Banjo, and they're going to make Banjo-Kazooie. They get Grant Kirkhope to compose the soundtrack. I don't know what else Grant's done. However, clearly an iconic composer. I believe there's an interview out there with him. I watched a few different things to get ready for this episode, and there was some interesting stuff about the music composition, of course. And in audio history, it's one of the first games to ever feature vertical remixing, which is where they where there's just various sound layers that fade in and out depending on your player's location, which is, it seems kind of basic now, but it was Banjo-Kazooie. And, of course, it's considered one of Rare's classic best games. Mm-hmm. These days, I don't know, I guess Rare is probably still thought of as the Banjo-Kazooie people. They did Perfect Dark, I believe. Was that them? I believe that was them.
Yeah, that was them. James Bond, 007 GoldenEye.
Right,
that was them.
GoldenEye, of course.
I would say that, I don't know, I feel like nowadays, if I were to go on the street to any like average younger gamer, I would imagine that they would think more Donkey Kong Country at this point. There have been more Donkey Kong Countries coming out recently, like the Wii and Switch and all these things, right? I don't know how much Banjo-Kazooie as a name is remembered anymore, unfortunately.
I feel like it's gotta, Rare's got a lot of good stuff. I feel like maybe I undersold it. They had Battletoads, Donkey Kong, Banjo-Kazooie.
Oh no, Rare is amazing. They are a legendary studio. At this point, it's a husk of its former self. Rare is still around, but it's been through so many
Sea of Thieves, baby.
Yo! Okay, never mind. Rare is great. Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves slaps. It's not for me, but I've always enjoyed it whenever I played it.
I always want to get back. I've only played it for like 5 hours, but I always want to find a group of people to play with because it seems like it'd be a great one.
I'm not exactly sure where we left off. I believe
we were talking about Dream, about how apparently bears are cooler than rabbits, which are cooler than boys.
Yeah, boys are not cool at all. So.
Yeah, definitely. Boys are not cool.
So Rare goes through and starts as Dream, and it ends up as Banjo-Kazooie. They're directly inspired by Super Mario 64, but most importantly, this game comes out on the N64, not on the Super Nintendo, which is what Dream was originally going to come out on. They're quick adopters of the new hardware. They are firm believers in the N64, and they create the collectathon platformer known as Banjo-Kazooie. And for me, I think what's so interesting about this is that this is really like the birth of a genre, and I see a lot of what's going on here in Ocarina of Time, which is something we're both playing currently right now, which you have this open world experience where there's no longer a defined end point. Like there is, right? Like you collect enough things, you do enough stuff. It's when Ocarina comes out that we really kind of take the rails off of that. But here, as opposed to previous Mario games where you go from left to right, beginning to end, and then that level is over, or Donkey Kong games, which are the same thing, maybe more vertically designed. Now you have Banjo-Kazooie, which is a collectathon. You're in an open space. Yeah. There's no obvious direction in which way to go. There's only the design of the game itself to push you and lead you and really take you on the adventure, on the story that they're trying to tell, which, I mean, there's not much of a story. The story is the levels, but...
I would say that is true in all levels except one. There's one level that I do not think the level design is very conducive to like, ooh, what's this cool new area? I want to go over there and collect stuff. Or this is a cool area. There's one level. I don't know if you'll guess it, where I was dreading it. Is that the boat level?
That's the one with the underwater level.
No, I'm talking about
the sandy, the bucket, the second level.
It's Rusty's bucket. It's not. It's much further in.
No, you do the first level where you turn into a termite, and then that's the next. And then the next level I did was I believe Rusty's bucket.
Zooey levels. I am looking at this. It's been a hot minute since. You're talking about. I'm talking about Rusty Bucket Bay.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about Treasure Trove Cove?
Yes. I was talking about Treasure Trove Cove, not Rusty Bucket Bay. Yeah, Rusty Bucket Bay is a tough one.
It made me realize. I guess we can talk a little bit about this. You played the Xbox 360 version, right? I played the original N64 version. And I was not aware of this, but the N64 version has a godforsaken mechanic that I do not understand what the thought process was around this mechanic. For viewers who don't know, it's even hard to explain. So in most games, like Mario 64, you have a bunch of stuff that you want to collect. In Banjo-Kazooie, there's a lot of stuff you want to collect too. Specifically, what I'm talking about are the musical notes. In Mario 64, the way that the same analogy of like how much it appears and what they do and stuff like that would be kind of like coins. They appear everywhere, but in Mario 64, collecting a coin is a nice to have. You can get a star from it if you wish, but it is a nice to have that only that persists throughout your lifetime. The way that it works in Banjo-Kazooie is that anytime you collect a musical note within a level, you are setting up a high score, so to speak, on that level of how many musical notes you've collected on one life. And you use those musical notes, that high score, you don't pay, it's not a currency, it's not something that you collect and you keep on you. Once you leave the level, you lose all your musical notes. And when you go back into that level, the musical notes are reset and you're back at zero. And the reason this is kind of annoying is because it feels like it's something you're collecting. It feels like a collectathon. By making this obtuse high score level thing, it now means that later on there are doors that are closed depending on the total sum of high scores of musical notes that you've gained across the whole level. Not how many musical notes you've collected. It's the sum of the high score at each level. And that is such a... And the Xbox 360 version, God bless them, they removed that mechanic.
When Rare was acquired by Microsoft, and they started re-releasing Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, all the other Banjo games, that was one of the major changes, was this change to musical notes, where it goes from being like a high score number that you need to get to open certain doors in the N64 version, which, by the way, I don't remember that at all from it. So you basically have to 100% the musical notes in every level on the N64 up to a certain point, because you don't get to just collect however many you need to get through the next door. Which is pretty... Yeah. Which is like pretty like interesting and cool design space to be in. Not the get the highest score every time, but the I only need as much as I need. It gives a lot of player agency in the Xbox remake.
And I know that this is all sounding me complaining about this. Like, now that you've explained, dear listeners might be like, okay, I mean, it's very obtuse, but you know what? Just collect the musical notes. But the problem is that some of these levels are so unforgiving. Some of these levels have one-hit kill areas, where you like just holes where you can fall through, and if you fall through, it isn't like in Ocarina of Time where you just go back to the beginning of the room with one less heart. No, you've lost a life, you go back to 0. Some of these levels, something that I guess we kind of to the difficulty of Banjo-Kazooie, I felt a few times where I got wombo comboed by enemies. The invincibility frames does not seem like enough sometimes.
It's a little sometimes awkward. I get it. It's a pretty brutal game.
Yes, it is. I guess we can talk about difficulty now. And
we should talk about it all.
It's interesting. I'm just gonna come out and say it. The seal has been broken on on Mario 64 being talked about. Which one do you think did you have more fun, or like there's some things that one or the other has
historically
better?
Or today?
Even today, you like, or not even historically, just very personal. Like, I like Banjo-Kazooie more because the feeling of exploration.
I like Super Mario 64 better.
Yeah, me too.
The music, honestly, it's kind of crazy. It comes down to the music and the characters, and I feel like I relate way more to the Mario 64 music and the characters. Like, I have that dumb little penguin like burned into my retinas permanently, and I can't. There's just something that's so unhinged to me to think about this tiny little Italian plumber going absolutely just buck wild, going full haywire in the world of this little friggin' penguin and the penguin's mom, and they're just just causing absolute chaos in this world, killing it's me, Mario, and it's like, oh my god, I find Mario to be an extremely unhinged character, especially now, and I think that makes I feel more endeared towards Mario for that reason, as opposed to Banjo-Kazooie, which is a ridiculous character for the sake of it.
That is very interesting, because I agree 100% that I enjoy Mario 64 a lot more. But I kind of like Banjo-Kazooie and the story of Banjo-Kazooie more as a character and as a concept. It's just the snarkiness of Kazooie, the brazenness. Like, I guess really comes down to Banjo is just a Sora from Kingdom Hearts, just like a dumb, I can be friends with anyone, and has this like evil like side, which is Kazooie, and is just being snarky. And I think Conker's Bad Fur Day, which is another great Rare game in the same vein as Banjo-Kazooie, really did a disservice to Banjo-Kazooie to making it feel like, oh, Conker's Bad Fur Day is the sarcastic, snarky, adult
Yeah.
Banjo-Kazooie, but Banjo-Kazooie itself has some like good jokes in there that are like adult, like they don't go full on adult, but they're like, I don't think a kid would have understood this joke. This joke has so many layers and is so good. I personally feel like I enjoyed the characters of Banjo-Kazooie and the music of Banjo-Kazooie more. But even with all that, the gameplay is what essentially seals the like nails the coffin for me for just Mario's 64's controls are so tight.
Yes.
I play Mario 64 like every few years, maybe not to completion, but just to like get that feeling again of like, oh my goodness, this just feels so tight. It's a wonder how the heck Nintendo was able to get that on their first try. Like that is crazy amount of work thinking that this is the first 3D platforming game that got it right.
Yeah.
And it was their first attempt.
Yeah, they just
right?
knocked
Like,
it right
this
out of the park. I mean, they never really
like,
did
what
anything
the
other. There was nothing before that, right?
Nothing. Nothing. Nothing 3D.
Nothing that Nintendo did. There was
nothing that Nintendo did.
There was one other game that came out before Super Mario 64,
Yeah.
Jumping Flash, I think. It's like a rabbit for.
Oh, yep.
Had a few sequels.
Yep, I know which one.
That's like a classic. That was maybe the first one, but yeah, I think that was it is crazy.
There's so many times where in Mario 64 it feels like Mario has so many moves. This is now Mario 64 apparently. No, I'm just kidding.
It's in the conversation.
I'm bringing this back to Banjo-Kazooie, but Mario 64, Mario has so many different moves, and every time you learn of a different move, because the game doesn't tell you that you can just pit stop jump like to do an arc backwards. It doesn't tell you that you can triple jump to get a like higher jump. This is the last one, and all these things. And some of these are very not obtuse, but very, the first time you do them, you're like, why would I ever want to do that? Why wouldn't I just jump? Or why wouldn't I do X, Y, or Z or anything like that? And as you play the game and you master the game, you find all those nooks and crannies and all the reasons why you would choose to do those jumps and to do all those things. That never really happened with Banjo-Kazooie. With Banjo-Kazooie, and Kazooie have a lot of movement tech. But there are some movement tech that I was like, why don't I just always use this? Like, I don't get like why would I ever punch in Banjo-Kazooie? Why would I ever walk around when I can just Kazooie run all over the place?
Right.
Like there's a lot of tech in Banjo-Kazooie that seems more like an oversight of like, well, we kind of need to have something here, I guess. Rather than being a reason to use it. Yeah, so that's, I guess, another thing that I really like about Mario 64 versus Banjo-Kazooie, where Banjo-Kazooie, really the world that you're exploring kinda, and the story that it's telling, which I guess we haven't told what the story is, even though it's very simple.
Yeah.
Even with all that, you go to play that game because of that feeling, not because it feels good, but because you're imagining how it would be to explore these places and how it feels to play all these things. I guess it's the difference between like game feel or controller feel or like all those things versus like setting and theming and emotiveness kind of deal. It's more of that is what I feel like Banjo-Kazooie brings to the table.
I think that's a very interesting point, because I feel like the movement and the traversal in Banjo-Kazooie is directly descended from Super Mario 64, and to me, I think it makes a lot of sense. I maybe prefer Banjo-Kazooie's traversal overall. I think Mario's movement in 64 is it feels very natural. And it's hard for me to say that because I feel like Super Mario 64 is so old at this point, and it is so ingrained in my memory, even in like muscle memory to a degree. in my history of like speed running and having friends who speed run, like Super Mario 64 is like that game that's just like it's always there. People are always running it. It's like a classic in the space, and the movement there feels very natural to a degree, but the movement in the traversal in Banjo-Kazooie feels, I guess, a little bit more evolved from the Super Mario 64, and it doesn't always work. I think there are a lot of cases of, why would I ever do this other thing when this thing exists? Why would I ever punch as Banjo except for that one time I need to kill that one hermit crab? So I think
almost go
that
I will.
that was a crappy boss. You had a bad time with that. You had a really. I watched you play that on stream, and I was just like, "Oh my god, Fran, you're."
I didn't even fight him. Did I defeat him on that stream?
Not that I saw. You got extremely.
Yeah,
salty.
I think I left.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't need this. I don't need this what's it called? The jigsaw puzzle.
That
I don't need the
jiggy?
jigsaw puzzle. That jiggy. I don't need this jiggy. No, wait, no. Jiggies are the critters.
Oh, you're right. It is just a puzzle piece. I think, yeah, so for me, it's just, I think the movement and the traversal is really cool. It's very different, and it feels like it's exploring the space of you're a bear and a bird. So, like, you can fly around, you can run around on stork legs, you can roll around like bears roll around. Like, it has, like, all of these things that make it feel, like, really endearing and fun and silly, and plays into the overall vibe, I mean, of the story. To say I prefer one to the other, I mean, I guess I prefer Super Mario 64 only because it feels a little bit tighter. A lot of time, I felt like Banjo's movement was a little blocky. I don't know how much of that was just the set design, like the actual like level design was a little punishing at times.
Yeah.
So I will admit I'm not the biggest fan of this style of game. I've never been crazy about platformers.
Interesting.
And I don't think I beat Super Mario 64 to completion as a kid. I don't remember doing so.
Okay, interesting.
So this is like a collectathon, something like that. Like I enjoy a particular kind of platformer and collectathon now. I guess that's more of like how open world games are designed today. That's kind of the thoroughfare, like the idea highway from a Banjo-Kazooie collectathon to Assassin's Creed 1 million.
Yeah.
I think we could.
This really does give me some context into your mind space or your mind palace of like what you like in platforming and everything like that. Because for me, I'm the exact opposite. I love 3D platformers. I finished Mario 64 when I was very young. I play it, like I said, every few years. The last time I played it was with the 30-year anniversary. I played A Hat in Time and loved it. A Hat in Time is Banjo-Kazooie 3. Banjo 3E, but dare I say it, even better than Banjo 3E could ever be, because Hat Kid is such I love her.
I played a little bit of Hat in Time, and I loved playing Hat in Time. I just never feel like I always feel like I get like, okay, I've had it's like, for me, like platformers like this feel like ice cream. I love ice cream, but I don't want to eat it for 3 meals. I don't want to eat it for an hour. I don't want to eat except for Ben and Jerry's. I'll eat an entire carton in one sitting. But that's where I get it. And that's the same thing that happened to me here. I'm like, this is great. I'm loving it. I'm having so much fun. I'm like, I have to do this how many more times?
Okay, interesting. Because so now that I'm thinking about it, and I brought it up, the Hat in Time, I think Hat in Time is a combination of Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie. It's the one thing that it doesn't have is the music. The music isn't as good as Banjo-Kazooie's music. But the characters and this theme and this emotiveness and like all this quirky story, the levels are super quirky to where you're going and what they even have to do. It really does. The levels really are just out of nowhere. We're just throwing stuff at the wall, and whatever
Super Mario
sounds cool, we'll
T-Rex.
just do it. Yeah, exactly. Sure. Super Mario T-Rex, Super Mario. What are the other things? I guess that's the weirdest one you can turn into. Yeah, kind of. went straight into the weirdest one there. So I think that ahead of time, I think it's Banjo-Kazooie. I would almost tell anyone if they wanted to. If you are a young person,
Oh God.
and you are like, I want to learn about different game
Boomer Fran,
game
everyone.
stuff. Boomer Fran, where's I need to shave and losing my hair. I would say play Ahead in Time, but play the Banjo-Kazooie soundtrack.
Wow, that's the machete order I did not expect to come out of this. I will say, if you are looking to, if you're younger and you've never played an N64 game, or very few, or you didn't grow up with it, I think this is 100% a must-see. I don't think that you can really skip it. If you're examining the history of the N64, the history of Nintendo, the history of Rare, the genre, like, Banjo-Kazooie is absolutely 100% a game worth revisiting. I, however, just am not, and I know this about myself, it's very seldom that I'm not trying to beat myself up about it, but I'm also not a guy that, like, finishes a million games. I'm more likely to have 10 games at 75% and tell you exactly how I feel about them than to take every game to the end. And maybe this is episode 2 is just as good a place for me to talk about this, but I don't think that finishing a game gives me less ability to discuss it critically, except for maybe like story, or if there's like some maybe like a major gameplay change at the end of the game. But if somebody is underpinning the value of this game on something that you get to do in the last 2 hours, I think that speaks to the game design in and of itself. That's just me personally. I know there's a lot of people out there who feel like you need to beat a game to be able to talk about it, and I think that's fair. But it's not. It's very different from like watching half a movie and then saying the movie's crap versus. Now I'm not saying Banjo-Kazooie's crap, but for me, it's just I don't know what I'm going to get in the last 3 hours of Banjo-Kazooie that I did.
Oh, so you didn't?
I didn't finish it. No, and I said that at the top too. But yeah, I did not finish. I didn't finish this game, and I'm not upset about it. And I feel like I got quite a bit out of revisiting it, specifically thinking about why this was sort of given to me as something that was so meaningful and so important to somebody's past. And at the end of the day, it's still the music and the characters and the vibe. And I think there's some, like, even the stuff we've talked about is just really incredible here, with just the way that the traversal methods and the history of platformers and collectathons has impact today. But that's where I'm at with finishing games. That's my little soapbox.
I think it's completely fair. There are some games that I would say you kind of need to finish it to get the full
like Typing of the
impact.
Dead.
There are very few. I guess I wouldn't know.
I have no idea. If there's like a twist ending in Typing of the Dead, let me know. But
I was gonna say something kind of like The Last of Us would be a game that I would say.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing this up, because The Last of Us is on our list.
Oh, really?
It is. I don't. Whenever we get to the end of this list, we'll get to it. It's pretty much at the very end. There's like 6 ways to play the game, and it's the same game every time. I don't know. I'll probably play it on PS5, but that to me is a really great example of right. So The Last of Us is a game that you probably, I would say, need to see to the very end to really talk about what that game's doing. But that's not from, I think, a gameplay perspective.
Yes, I agree.
That's because Naughty Dog wants to make a movie. Naughty Dog really, really wants to make a movie, but they know how to make video games. Agree. And you know what? That's fantastic, because they make some of the highest quality cinematic video game experiences on the market, bar none, right? They set a new standard. It's one of those games that you can tell people it came out on a PS3. You all remember it came out on PS3, and nobody will tell you. They're like, what? I thought it was No, it was a PS3 game. Incredible experience. Must see, must play. But that's more like seeing a movie. Like, you can't tell me that you don't like Star Wars: A New Hope because you didn't like the first 10 minutes. That I don't think is very fair to the movie. If you get halfway through a movie, though, listen, if you get halfway through a movie and you fall asleep, maybe you're tired. Try it again. You get halfway through a movie a second, a third time, and you just can't finish it. there's something that's not working in that story for you.
Yeah.
And right, like taste is super subjective. That's how it always is. But yeah, on your point, yeah, The Last of Us is a game that you should see through to the very end or try to, and recognize that it might not be for you because maybe the story's not for you.
Yeah. I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, and I do agree practically with everything. I do feel that there is, for The Last of Us specifically, when I played The Last of Us Part 2, it made me realize I wasn't as connecting with Last of Us Part 2 as much as I connected with Part 1. And because of that, a lot of the gameplay mechanics that were just straight from the first game just were just hitting differently. I was like realizing, man, Last of Us 1 from a gameplay perspective didn't do that much like revolutionary. However, and this is where the devil's advocate stuff comes in, I do think that The Last of Us is probably the first and perhaps best version of storytelling while you're playing, of the characters talking and reacting to the things that you're doing as you play, that really make that relationship feel very, very real, and therefore is why it hits more at the end of the game. So while I do agree that the story is definitely one of the big reasons why that game you want to see it through to the end, I do feel that there are some, maybe you don't need to call it video game mechanics, maybe it's more interactive mechanics, if you want to, like, if you don't consider two people talking to each other reacting to things you do a game, then sure, go off then. But if you want to call it just interactive, then sure. That I do feel like is something that only can happen in video games, right? Because there is a level of interactability and a level of you need to put in some work to get something out of it, and that by nature just makes you more involved and much more ingrained into what is happening at the moment. And so I agree with you that Last of Us is definitely a game that you should probably 100%, mostly because of the story. I don't want to sell too short the interactive component and the things that Last of Us was able to bring from a video game standpoint that couldn't have been done in a movie or couldn't have been done in the series, because the series came out, and that
I totally agree. And I don't think that just watching HBO's The Last of Us is the same as playing it. I do think it's remarkably close. And I think that maybe somebody who is less interested in games as media could watch the show and have a very near experience. But I do agree with quite a bit of what you're saying. You know, it's there's certainly there's always an element of I'm a player in a game holding a controller to manipulate a character in a space that you can't separate from the act of gaming. In the same way that Papers, Please is a game that's not really a game, that you're manipulating characters and tools in a space to, you know, to check people over a border. But and I don't want to get so far off the beaten trail because we are on the Banjo-Kazooie episode. But but all that being said,
I was about to say,
is Banjo-Kazooie a game you have to play to the end?
No. I don't think I really
do not think. And so like that's where I'm at. Like I'm here for the music. I'm here for some of the characters. I'm here to listen to like grunty, like make stupid noises. But it's at the end of the day, for me, especially today with limited time, I found like the humor, like especially Kazooie's humor. I really was like kind of turned off by it. It was like very, it felt like very dated, very like 90s, super sarcastic, like Chandler from Friends humor. Like it just felt like very like, and like the whole back and forth between Kazooie and Bottles, I think.
Oh yeah, that was dumb.
Is either.
I thought that was
well, so you say that, but like that, I think that's like you either really enjoy that, and that's what you're there for, is like this hilarious sort of back and forth between the mole and the bird, just, you know, making fun of each other, or you're really not. And like, And I think that's kind of what was happening for me. Was I was just like, okay, like this is,
So
this is a little, it was just like, it was like too saccharine, not in the sense that it was too sweet. It was just like a little too much, for a lot of the experience I felt. And I wanted to sort of get into it and try to remember what I remembered as a child playing it, which was, it was funny and it was silly, and like moving a character in this way in this space was like mind blowing. And in many ways, I think it still is, and the things that you can do. But I think if you're trying to have your
but
mind blown by traversal, play Super Mario 64. If you want to have fun traversing, play Banjo-Kazooie.
that's it.
That's kind of where I'm at.
I don't know. I think that more than anything, I think this game you can just play the first 3 levels and be done. And it was like, okay, I get it. I'm
Yeah.
good. I'll play the first 3 levels and then go do something else. I'm actually curious, since you mentioned that you didn't finish the game. Where did you get to?
It's been a while. I got to Freeze Easy Peak.
Oh, cool.
And I liked Freeze Easy Peak. I was having a decent time. But
I love
honestly,
Freeze
I just was getting a little frustrated at that point
Mhm.
with yet another place with yet another ominous liquid that I couldn't touch. And I was like, okay, so I just did the swamp that I can't walk in, so I need boots that are timed. I'm like, okay, whatever. And then I go to Freeze Easy Peak, and it's like, oh, the water's too cold. You can't go in the water. I'm like, okay, let me. And I was like, I like trying to like sequence break a little bit, or try to see if I can do something in the wrong order. Now that I'm an adult with like, with different brain worms than as a child, and I, try to go to the desert, and it's like there's quicksand. You can't go, and I'm like, okay, guys, like, really? Like 3 different deadly liquids I can't touch in a row? Like, and I need, like, different boots to get through them? I need quick boot, and that whole thing to me, that's really where I started to fall off from the game. Was I need an item that has a minimum time usage to get through this area that doesn't have anything to do with my ability to use my traversal
Yeah.
to my benefit, to my character's benefit. And that's really where I wanted to get off that. That's where I wanted to get off that
I
ride, because
think it's probably a good place to get off, because at that point you haven't done Rusty Bucket Bay, you haven't done the Four Seasons level,
Click
which I
Clock.
think Click Clock. Oh my goodness, what a great idea! But Lord have mercy, the verticality in that level just destroys any
Well, that's
fun
one of
that
the
I
most
have with
punishing
that one.
ones. It's super long. It's
Yes.
very punishing. Am I mistaking? That's the one with a lot. I'm trying to remember. That's the one with a lot of backtracking. No, I'm thinking of Rusty Bucket, I think.
Yeah, Rusty Bucket is the one with a lot of backtracking. That one is a lot of backtracking if you miss something. Like if I missed something a few times and I
Yeah.
realized, oh my god, I need to go all the way back to get the power to do the other thing. Oh,
Yeah. Hi again, folks. We had to step away just for a second to take care of a few phone calls, but we will be back in just a second. Thank you. Fates are with us here, that it's time to, that just like you don't have to finish every game, maybe we don't have to finish every episode. But no, I'm kidding. So let's just wrap up our thoughts and sort of our takeaway from Banjo-Kazooie. And I don't want to go in, tearing any game down or creating a sense of negativity around a game. I think Banjo-Kazooie is fantastic, and I'm going to make a note of it again when I record just a brief intro for this episode. But part of this, my blog, and part of this podcast is about examining what's cool about games and what brings us joy from them, from our past and currently. And having your perspective as a game dev, I think, really adds a lot of nuance to that experience. And I think there's a lot to love here. I do think that maybe it's just not for us, and I think that's totally okay. I want to make sure that is loudly and proudly stated, that I think Banjo-Kazooie is fantastic, but for me, the revisit wasn't, and it was a little disappointing. It wasn't what I wanted it to be. It wasn't like my experience of playing, like, Obra Dinn or something like that.
Yeah. I think I'm in the same boat, and that has to do with the whole disappointment or what I wanted to get out of it. I think having come out at the same time, or not the same time, but around the same time as Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64, seeing how much people love Banjo-Kazooie, seeing how much people love Rare and the prestige that Rare has, having played A Hat in Time, going back to play Banjo-Kazooie was something I felt was gonna be, at the very least for me, kind of like watching Neon Genesis Evangelion. For me, I am somebody who, it's fine. I'm not a big fan of Neon Genesis Evangelion, but I did really understand the impact that it had in the given time that it was released.
Were you
And I was
ever
hoping.
were you ever an Eva fan?
I don't think so. I watched Eva the first time.
This is 100% a different episode. You just sent me. You almost sent me off a ledge. So
okay, we can talk about that
yeah, we could talk about that
afterwards.
another time when we do our anime spin-off, I guess.
Our anime spin. Use your animes. Use your waifus.
Oh boy.
So I honestly think
Use your waifus.
Use your waifu. Your waifu. Use your waifus. Don't lose your waifu. I am somebody who thinks Banjo-Kazooie, and so the reason I bring that is that I didn't feel like Banjo-Kazooie met, at least for me, that same expectation of I will get a sort of understanding and I'm appreciative of it. I'm appreciative of what it does, but I don't see from it something that I don't see in other games of the same era. Your Mario 64, your Donkey Kong 64, and even I was about to say Glover for some reason. I haven't played Glover since I was 12. I have no idea.
We can't talk about Glover on this podcast. We can't do it. It's the number. We cannot get Glover pilled, Fran. The number of just thinking about other video game. This is that comment really just knocked me down. This
is the second time. Eva and Glover? Are you kidding?
Eva was because I was not. That was but Glover. Oh, it's just I listen to other video game podcasts out there, and Glover comes up, and it's how can we all be so Glover pilled? But
dude, Glover is a great game, and I will not take any questions.
That's fine. I'll be holding a panel at San Diego Comic-Con on Gex, and there will not be a section for questions.
How about games that start with a G? Best games that start with a G. Glover,
it's got to be
Gex?
Glover, Gex 2, Glover 2.
Was there a Glover 2?
No, not yet.
Anyways,
you can bring it to life in VR.
Oh my god! But to finish the thing, my thought process of who would I recommend Banjo-Kazooie? What is in our today? What is Banjo-Kazooie mean to us? I think that the best recommendation I can give is going back to that whole analogy of it feels like a Sat AM cartoon or Cartoon Network classic 90s cartoon. If you're looking to play a cartoon, play Banjo-Kazooie, play each level, play it as if it were an episode, then wait a week and play another
That's
another
a
one.
Wild take.
That way you don't get bogged down with all the griminess of some of the mechanics and stuff like that, and you can maybe enjoy it a little bit more.
Yeah. So I agree with quite a bit of what you had to say. I would say my takeaways from Banjo-Kazooie is that honestly the vibes are immaculate.
Yeah.
Outside of some issues I had with the humor, and that's probably just personal taste more than anything. Mm-hmm. And it's just a little bit dated. It's like watching an old episode of Friends. You're like, ugh. I would have laughed at that when I was 16, but
that's fair.
So I think that the vibes are so tight in Banjo-Kazooie. The music's great. The characters are super fun. The story, we never got to the story. That, dear listener, that's because there isn't really one. I'll give it to you in 10 seconds. Gruntilda, the evil witch, steals Banjo's sister. I don't remember her name, and wants to body swap with her, like Freaky Friday style, or like The Fly. Actually, it's. You're right. Sorry, I apologize. This is like the anti-Cronenberg Fly. She wants to body swap with his sister because she's younger, and man, I'm gonna get derailed so quick. I know I said I want to wrap this. All right, my last comment, and like about the vibes, all that. That's great. Like the game is fun. I would just blitz the game, to be honest. If you put it down, I think you would lose speed, like I did. But what's really interesting about this game that is something I haven't seen before is that when you close the game, you save it, and you say exit game or close game, it ends the game. It literally says the game is over, and you see a cutscene where Gruntilda wins. Yeah, every time you stop playing that game, it brings you to a cutscene where Gruntilda wins. She body swaps with your sister, and that's the end of the game. And then like the game like taunts you for not finishing it.
Wait, is that so? I've seen memes of sexy Gruntilda. Is that where it's from?
Yeah,
I thought that was somebody
not Bowsette,
made it up
bro.
online.
That's real.
Oh my god! I didn't know that was real. I didn't know that was canon.
Yeah. It's that's the craziest thing. It's like you end the game and they're like, "No, bro, it's over. You didn't save her. You don't get the girl." And it's like that's pretty heavy as like a kid. Like you lose. Do not pass go.
Oh my goodness. Which, by the way, since you mentioned getting the girl, I do enjoy a lot that this game, yes, it's a damsel in distress, but it is a non-love interest damsel in distress, where all games at that era were very, male-centric, get the girl in the end to get romantically involved with them. Like, I do like that this game is your little sister, and you're like, well, obviously, I'm her big brother. I'm gonna go save her.
It's a great twist on an old trope. And, Nintendo's great at this, right? Nintendo did this with Super Metroid. It's the hero isn't a dude, a little sensualized, I guess, at that last cutscene. But if she just takes her helmet off, it's like, it's a woman, and that's great. And that's something that Nintendo's got going on for it in the 90s here is subverting some expectations like that. I too can appreciate what Banjo-Kazooie did here, and I would say honestly, if you want to experience a little bit of why if somebody in your life is born in the 90s and grew up playing a game like this, I think you'll learn a lot about their childhood if they played this game by playing it. And I think that's and if anything, show up for the music.
Yeah, I feel like you'll understand why they like Dark Souls.
I don't do it. Now I'm gonna play the music out. Don't do it. Don't bring up Dark. You didn't have to do that because we're doing Ocarina of Time next.
Banjo-Kazooie is the Dark Souls
of
3D platformers.
I'm talking about Elden Ring. They are 1-to-1.
Do I need to finish Elden Ring?
Bro,
I've never played.
We're gonna have a big issue when my 10-hour Ocarina of Time episode has a 5-hour Elden Ring subversion in the middle. But anyway, that's what I got. We're gonna do we're not doing Elden Ring next. We're gonna do Ocarina of Time next. I'm playing on the 3DS, which I think is by far the best way to play it. What are you playing on, Fran?
Agreed. Even though I'm playing it on
classic.
N64, I didn't want to cramp my hands on the 3DS version, so I decided to go on the N64. Yeah, it is so real. I remember playing that and the 3DS, and I also, once you told me you were doing the 3DS, I was like, well, maybe I'll do the other one, and that way we can have essentially a Banjo-Kazooie Xbox 360 versus N64.
Or on Microsoft on your PC with a controller. Do not play the N64 version. I'm sorry. As far as Ocarina of Time goes,
please.
If you can't get it on 3DS, because I think it's a pretty expensive game at this point, and the 3DS shop is closed. RIP. I think your best bet is probably to use some wiles and wit to find a way to do so. You can find lots of games everywhere, you know.
You know, the backyard, the forest, and the backyard.
Yeah,
You can
I would
just go out
recommend
there.
emulating it. Frankly,
Who knows what
I
you can
don't think
find
you need to
out
beat
there.
around that bush, but
If we're getting to the emulation part of this,
I don't know how
I
to.
asked you.
Yeah, I'm not gonna tell you how to get there unless you ask. Anyway, Fran, where can they find you?
They can find me at L_Fantastico on. Oh wait, Twitter doesn't exist anymore.
It's still around. It's still around.
I mean, you can find me there. I don't really post that much. I should probably get onto Instagram Threads. You know, that's the new hot.
That's the kids are doing.
Thing,
So I'm told.
The new and stream from time to time L_Fantastico. How about you, Jason?
Well, Fran, thanks for asking. You can find me on twitter.com at Conwobi, KONWOBI, and you can find me streaming on Twitch occasionally at Wobi_con. Occasionally, I've been playing some Magic Arena. I'm thinking about getting into Magic Online, some other nerdy stuff. But I'm looking forward to streaming games that I have on the computer for this segment, for this podcast, when possible. And and maybe you'll find me on Mastodon. I don't know. I'm going to pick. Actually, you know what? That's not true. You can find me on Tumblr at Froggy Fight Club. That's where it's all going to be at. Tumblr's where it's
such
at.
A good one.
I'm in Froggy Fight Club. Come find me. Come at me. I will reblog everything you reblog if you tell me that you found me here.
Oh, with that, I think that's to use your items.
That's it.
Not use your waifus.
Not use your animes, use your items. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. Bye.
Items.
And thank you to the fantastic William O'Rourke for our theme music. You can find Will over at William F. O'Rourke. That's OROURKE on Instagram for more work. Thanks, Will.